I am honored to commemorate the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and the United States. We both know that those words, diplomatic relations, do not convey what we mean to say. Today we celebrate not the renewal, but the reinvigoration and the loud reaffirmation of an undeniable fact. The deep and abiding kinship between two peoples, different in look and manner, but whose habits of the heart are exactly the same. On July 4, 1946, in front of the Rizal Monument, in gusty winds and misty rains, the Philippine flag was raised, alone again for the second time, and spread itself out, red, white, and blue, sun shining anew, reaffirming again the triumph, though brief, of the first race to win independence in Asia, and the first colony to declare itself a republic and a democratic one. That sun set quickly, pulled down by another conqueror, which, ironically, professed and practiced the identical aims of the Philippine struggle for independence. One nation under God, to be sure, he under Mother Mary, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So indivisible, it will never part with so much as a particle of itself for any price. It will keep it all at any cost. In the 75 years following that day, the Philippines and the United States formed an enduring alliance, tested in clement and cruel circumstances, in war and peace, an alliance deeply rooted at its true beginning in the wet soil of blood spilled and tears shed of the most destructive war in history. A war that conferred upon Manila, once Pearl of the Orient, the dark distinction of the most destroyed capital, second only to Warsaw. Manila could have been spared that fate if MacArthur had reneged on his repeated promise that, however dubious the strategic benefit of liberating Manila first, instead of going straight for Japan, he would first return to free his people. His people is how he felt about them. His last job was of Field Marshal of the Commonwealth Philippine Army. It is a custom that one who serves what more commands the armed forces of another country belongs to it. Not in the legal, but in the strongest sense of how deeply he felt, and the Filipinos reciprocated. We, schoolboys and schoolgirls alongside our parents, lined the boulevard named after the victor of Manila Bay and cheered till our throats hurt the American Caesar's last return. I grew up among resistance heroes. I know at least one buried in our Arlington, talibigan ng mga bayani or burial ground of heroes. He was my father. At the end of the war, he felt that the best of his life, after he'd held it cheap and the cost of resistance, was behind him. Everything after would be anti-climax. He would have violently disagreed if MacArthur reneged on his promise to spare the Filipino people the bloody blessing of keeping his word. We'd have emerged from the war unscathed, capital intact, classical buildings like in Washington, D.C., opera houses, historic sites, elegant residences, parks, and arcades. But that mercy would have been scorned by the great generation of our fathers, who preferred the terrible fulfillment of a solemn promise at whatever cost to country, capital, and casualties of over 100,000. Foreigners ask why so many Filipinos today, born long after the war, still hold Americans in the same high esteem and warm affection as their forebears did. All for a promise made when all prospect was lost of its fulfillment. The promiser had fled in the night to fight another day, he said, but he returned as promised, to the city of his affections a complete ruin. Yet it was a cheap price to pay, said those who paid most of it. For they cherished a terrible fidelity to three words over the prudent strategy of forgetting them. The blood we both shed, the cruelty we all suffered, proved a friendship that would outlast the worst travails, and endured strong despite our sovereign severance from the United States, beside whom we stood, not anymore as a dependent, but as an independent friend. My answer is that Filipinos prize the highest the things they cannot touch or spend. This is why they work their fingers to the bone in distant places, not to earn and spend on themselves. They eat sparingly there. In place of the meals they skip, they eat the small yet filling consolation that the meal they forego is served on the table of families back home. The Americans who fought a war so far from home, for a people so different in look and manner, but so alike in habits of the heart, were the same. Never let down a friend. It is not what you get out of something, but what you give for it that imparts its true value. Yet these memories of dangers shared and narrow escapes, of hopes dashed by defeat, kept alive in the least expected places, prisoner of war camps, hillside caves, and dark basements, are not ours but our fathers. Yet they're so vivid in our minds. Like the one of MacArthur's second triumphal return to his adopted country, when all of us, schoolboys and schoolgirls, alongside our parents, lined Dewey Boulevard and waved two flags of red, white, and blue, in one case with stars, and the other a sun shining on you. When the Americans left, they left but two tangibles: military bases, the biggest outside the United States, and sheets of paper printed with a treaty of mutual defense, of indeterminate intent and vaguer effect. One cannot really pin down what it requires of either side, and what, if anything, must first transpire for it to go into effect. But if we got little concrete benefit from it, heightened U.S. military assistance has happened only under this, the Duterte administration. We got something else, something we could give to others. In the geopolitical challenges of today, we welcome the American reaffirmation of its commitment to the MDT, articulated by no less than U.S. President Joseph Biden Jr. in a letter to President Duterte. The U.S. presence remains vital to maintaining stability, peace, and the rules-based order in the entire Southeast Asian region. Once again, what we prize most is something we share. We could strike a separate peace for ourselves alone, surrounded by the stopping power of water. But that's not the point. All the protagonists in the region, without a single exception, see a strong U.S. presence as imperative to peace and stability in Southeast Asia. They are the precondition for mutually beneficial cooperation rather than destructive conflict among themselves. Not a single power has so much as hinted at changing or abandoning the MDT. Indeed, they insist that it not be changed in any particular for the common safety. The MDT is part of the strategic landscape they are familiar with, a factor they have studied as long as it has existed. It is part and parcel of the geography. Rival powers fear one thing the most: uncertainty. They fear the disappearance of the MDT more than they fear the deterrence it poses to any larger ambition on their part. They have learned to live with it. They do not know what the landscape will be without it, except it won't be pretty. Of that, they are certain. Our economic relations remain strong, but I forgo reckoning the actual value. But it is nothing to do with money and commerce. It is all to do with shared values of faith and freedom, of liberty and independence, and of justice for all. The last as elusive for Filipinos as for Americans. But we both keep trying. We are so much alike even in our problems. When Filipinos look east and Americans look west, across the same vast ocean, they both see a tiny glimmer in the opposite horizon. That glimmer is the mirror each holds, where they see the image of the other, the reflection of themselves in what they hold dearest. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Happy 4th of July, America. Keep strong. No need to say keep true. You know us, we know you, as well as we know ourselves. God bless America. God bless our country. God bless us, one and all, Americans and Filipinos.